Welcome to the Pick Six podcast. I am joined with my good friend here, Drake, at Drake's PC. I'm DPZ, and I got my daughter Rhea or Mari over here, kind of hanging out for a second too. What we're going to be doing today is going to be a little bit different, Drake. I think because I think we're just going to kind of have a free flow. We don't normally do that. We usually get topics, but we didn't get topics today because I think they're all going to the crossover. So I think we're just gonna. I think you have a couple things you want to talk about. We're just gonna kind of free flow and just have a natural conversation. Do a mail deck, because apparently you have a picture of a guy in his undies. From what we just learned, right?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great idea. We're in the first week of summer right now, and it's hot, and our brains are fried. I was on another work trip this week. Went up to Cincinnati, and there was like no humidity in the air. Got to check out a Reds game. We did the riverboat cruise on the Ohio River. It was a real nice deal. And I come back to Arkansas and I get off the plane and I'm sweating just walking to my car. In fact, so if I start sweating in the middle of this episode, for those on video, it's not because I'm sweating the questions or the hobby topics or anything. It's just really hot. That's what it is. It's really hot and humid. But hey, it's summer in Arkansas, so what do you expect?
Well, yeah, it's summer. I mean, it's got to be hot. I mean, I don't know if I could survive down there, the heat, because I mean, we don't get the hot. We get hot up here, but it's not the same kind of hot. The Pacific Northwest hots, but we get hot, and we all die because we're so used to like 65, 55 degree weather most of the time. So,
for sure.
Yeah, no, that's definitely understood if you are sweating. So, mail day, brother. I know you have a mail day.
Yeah, so when you get sweaty or you're hot and all that, you typically go jump in the pool or you strip down to your undies or something. So it certainly makes sense to show a picture of a guy in his wrestling trunks. So this is the Andre the Giant. This is a promotional picture from 1984 from World Wrestling Federation. And so let me see if I can get it right. You got to look real closely, but it's signed in a ballpoint pen, and he's got a full signature. Andre the Giant. And so, it's hard to find where he signs his full wrestling name, Andre the Giant. There's a lot of pictures, with just Andre or something, it's an index card or something like that. The other thing I think that's unique about this is they misspelled it and it says Andre the Gaint. So it's like so I guess in 1984, the proofreading wasn't as good as it is now, hopefully. So, and an interesting thing, for most folks know me, I'm a huge wrestling fan, and Andre the Giant has some older like vintage wrestling cards, but I really wanted to find something that was unique, something you don't see every day. The 1982 Wrestling All Stars is a well-known wrestling card set, and he's got an earlier release that's a hand-cut card. I think it's 1973.
Really?
Yeah, yep. Which is really, really neat. And I know that that a lot of folks in that vintage wrestling card community, they go after both of those cards. But I was like, you know what? Let's get something different. Let's get a photo. It is a Type 3 photo, so it's not an original Type 1, which has really gotten traction and things like that. But I just thought it was a neat photo with a signature of a guy who passed away a long, long time ago, and certainly unique that Giant is spelled Gaint. And so I think that if you look in the PSA Pop report, it says it's a Pop 1. So as far as I know, that's the only photo like that that's signed. So just a unique piece of my collection. And as I've shared before, I like to have stuff that other people don't have. And so I think that's neat. So that's why I got it. So glad to share that with everybody.
Very cool. Let me show you. My mail day isn't here yet, but it's going to be here. And when it does show up, it's going to look like this. Let me try to find it here. I can pop it up on the screen. Let's see. It's not that one. It's that one. Yeah. I'm just going to share this with you. This is a Donruss Preferred Power Ken Griffey Jr. out of 55. It's actually not serial numbered. So I've got an explanation for it. I picked it up from my buddy Rodney, a great Griffey collector, and he was happy to share one of these very obscure 90s Griffey cards that are pretty cool. Basically this is called prized collections. the card here for this Donruss Preferred Power, this 168 that you can see on here. It's not going to get the credit it's owed. Unfortunately, this is from Marco Bisio Jr., another great Griffey collector. This is his commentary on the card. He goes, the lack of the serial number and it being a subset will keep the value down over time, even though there were only 55 of them printed. The shine on these is absolutely incredible and highly underappreciated. They don't cross-pollinate over to basketball, so sadly, both won't get to an attention that they deserve. Another card I picked up was a Techno. I wish I could show it. I don't have it to show on the screen, but this is a pretty cool-looking card. If I can make it a little bit bigger, I might be able to kick off the screen here. But I might be able to show it. I'm going to undo the screen. But that's one of the cards, and the other one is this one. You can kind of see it. This is out of 100. Pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty cool card. And that's another Griffey in 99. But that was actually serial numbered. So that one's a little more exciting. But both of them are raw. Very good condition. Mm-hmm. Rodney knows this condition. He'll send me a raw card if I buy it from him. He'll go, that's probably an 8. And it'll come back an 8. Or that's probably a 9. It'll come back a 9. So he really knows his stuff. And him and Marco are just like, they're the authority on Ken Griffey Jr., the history. Like, gosh, between those two guys, you will find any and every card, know about any and every card that's ever been produced for Griffey. So very excited to pick a couple of those up. Rodney's building up for something big, so I was happy to snatch a couple of those that you just never see. I mean, I think only a handful in the last 20 years have shown up for either card. So those are the kind of things I'm trying to aim at. Like less than $700 kind of purchases, but then I'll grade them and they'll come in at, but it's not going to matter. I'll just have them slabbed and they'll be a great part of the collection. Kind of moving in that direction, I think, because it's a lot more fun to collect in that way, like we talked about before. And of my player and of obscure, interesting, cool-looking, shiny cards that kind of pop. So those are my mail day. I should get that sometime next week. It probably should have been a mail day next week, but I haven't had a mail day in a minute, so I was kind of excited to finally share something. So you got Andre the Jeep. I've got a couple really cool Ken Griffey Jr. cards, and we're off and running, man. So let's segue into something different. How are you feeling, man? About you watch a lot of you hear some hobby content. There's lots of different stuff. Our buddy Dustin talks about different all the different topics du jour of the day, what everybody's talking about. You listen to conversations from other content creators where people are kind of feeling a little fatigued, tired, or the hobby's just about breaking. And if you're not breaking, it's either you're collecting or you're breaking, and you're gambling and you're prospecting, and the money being spent on some of these newer players is just outrageous. It sort of leaves you kind of like dangling. And I've said it before last week. I kind of feel like I'm in this weird, I'm trying to find a way to collect that I think is sustainable, that's affordable, but also is that it's invigorating and it makes it exciting. And I mean, putting the set together for 87 Fleer and PSA 9s is really fun. I'm slowly doing that. That's a fun thing to do. Keeps me engaged. Putting together some Griffies, that keeps me engaged. I know that you buy your Mannings and your Breeze when you can get them, and you slowly piece together cool, like, pictures of wrestling, Type 1 photos and things of that nature. Tell me how you're feeling. I mean, how are you feeling about the hobby right now? Do you feel like it's really focused? The focus is on the breaking and spending and prospecting on players and spending an enormous amount of money on people that have never done anything, versus collecting our players that we collect, the retired greats, the GOATs, whatever you want to call it. Is there really an investment aspect of this anymore, other than maybe like those big cards that most of us can't afford anyway? Is this really just boiled down to it's just a hobby? It really is just a hobby. I gave you a lot of questions there, but so maybe unpack a few for me.
Yeah, that's good. In my opinion, I think when COVID started and all that, the shift of folks turned into from a hobby to like money investment and things like that. And I think we're still there. You see, like you mentioned, the prospecting on players, people spending just oodles of money on those players, looking at, hey, this has got to be a PSA 10. and everybody's after the slab and just the latest and greatest name and things like that. And I was thinking about the other day, and I heard somebody somewhere where, used to, it's like 10 years ago, you'd go to a show and you'd walk around and somebody would have a price tag on something and you'd be like, oh, that maybe feels a little high, or, that feels a little low, like it's a good deal. And you just buy the card, right? And I feel like now every time it's somebody buys a card and they're going to want to resell it instantly. And it's all about, the amount of money that you can make and what's your margin when you're buying and selling. And, you get very much comped to death on cards where, you walk around shows or you listen to deals or things like that. And people are always like, wanting to know what's the last it sold for, what does similar players sell for, and things like that. And I think that it's something to an extent from an education standpoint, right? You want to be educated when you're buying anything as best you can, but I don't think that needs to be the focus of like why you're buying the card. It's seen more of as like a token or something that you're using to move into something else versus just truly, obtaining the card or, that collectible, whether it's a photo or whatever the case may be, because you really just want to own it, right? And if it holds its value over the long term, or if you can move it into something better down the road, then I think that's awesome, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of this thing. But I really think there's just still way too much focus around, what you can buy it for, and then what you can sell it for, and how much money you can make. That's my thought.
And you think that, where do you think everything ends up when all said and done? Do you feel like?
I mean, yeah. So I think we still haven't seen the bottom on a lot of cards. I think it's important. You look at a site like a Card Ladder, and you can see kind of a lot of things that are on that middle finger graph. And some things have settled back down. Some things have not settled back down. I was trying to remember the player, but there was some player in like a 90s basketball player, and I'd never heard of him before. And I think it was Credentials or PMG or Rubies or something like that. And it sold for like $5,000. And I was like, this is insane. This player I've never heard of before. And he's got a card selling for more than, again, as a Peyton Manning collector, I can reference Peyton Manning selling for probably 95% of Peyton Manning cards. And like, it's crazy to me. And I know it's different markets and, the parallel or the insert or whatever, it holds a lot of weight, but that's kind of more of a new thing. It hasn't really always been like that. And so I still think we're settling down. And I still think that, at some point it's going to turn back into more of a hobby again. So I don't think that we've seen the bottom of some cards. That doesn't mean that, cards you buy now won't go up in value in the short term and things like that. But it's important to be careful, because you have to understand who's buying and selling the cards, and are these cards going to collectors? Because collectors are important to sustain the hobby. You've got to have people that want to hold the cards. And as long as people are still playing a game of hot potato, it's kind of scary out there, as they say.
Yeah, and so here's another thing I was going to think about, or I wanted to talk about. And you mentioned, like, we haven't seen the bottom yet on prices, and some of these cards are being passed around, and the hot potato thing. Get out of my email here. Work email's going to keep popping off. Private and the crossover guys talked about this, I think, in an episode recently. The private sale versus the public sale, right? And a private sale being made public, what's the point? I mean, I think, and I kind of contradict myself, as I always do, as you guys all know who have listened to me long enough. I contradict myself quite a bit because I keep changing my mind about all these things, which I feel like as a hobbyist, you get to do that. This is kind of what we do. Not all of us, but some of us. I think that I find myself buying privately more, right? Like those two cards, I got those from Rodney. That was a private deal between him and I. Or you go to people you know and you trust, and it's easy. Or you got your collecting groups, and so you're comfortable with them, and they may be ready to move on from a card that they've had for a long time, and so they sell it to you, and you're like, okay, great, that's awesome, I'll take that. But that's never going to be publicly known on Card Ladder. You're not going to see it on Alt. You're not going to see that data collected anywhere. So some of these really, really rare cards, I think, are selling more than we think. They're just selling privately, potentially. It's scary to think about how much some of these cards that sell all the time publicly are still selling even more publicly or privately. Because I've had a few of those where, I've got some cards I picked up that aren't necessarily like that 87 Flair Jordan.
You know, I have a new comp I could put down that is pretty much in line with what the last sale was at. You know, right in there, within like maybe within 5% of what that is. But I didn't post it. It hasn't been posted as a sale. I could probably do that and prove it and show Chris and go, hey, Card Ladder should recognize this. Hey guys, you can recognize this. Here's all the data. Here's all the information. But I'm like, I don't really want to do it. Not that I don't want to have it be public, but I just don't have the energy or time or whatever. I just was like, okay, so how many people are doing that though, right? And you go to shows, right? Shows, which, I don't go to shows very much, right? You go to shows and there's probably lots of transactions. Those aren't being captured too. And I know this has been a topic people have talked about, but it's just interesting to me to think about. And it dovetails into this, how much of the hobby doesn't exist on Instagram and on YouTube. It's such a big, deep iceberg, right? We're just seeing the tip online. How many of these transactions are happening offline? I mean, if you're in the comment section below, as we kind of ramble on here with all these different rambles, grab something and mention it. This is one I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on. I mean, how many private sales do you think are happening versus public sales on rare cards, even in some of these bigger cards? Like how the 86 Flair Jordan PSA 10, has that sold privately a few times? And what were those numbers, right? I mean, it's bizarre. We put these numbers and we attach values to them because we can do that, but these values aren't totally accurate, just like the pop reports aren't totally accurate. So we're like weighing all of this, giving all this weight to these valuations and these grades, and we don't really truly know how valuable or how expensive some of these things really are, right? Mm-hmm. I know it's a big, long question again, but take that one. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the public versus private thing. I think, I've kind of found this a little bit myself is, when you deal with someone privately and you do a private deal, oftentimes you probably pay more for a card than if it went to auction. And so, I'm in many cases, I can be an impatient person because I'm a completionist, right? I want to complete a run, or I want to complete a set, or complete a whatever. So I get kind of anxious. And in that case, the ball's in the court of the seller. It's not in my court at all, especially when they know I really, really want something. So that demand is there for me, but I'm not willing to wait for someone to send that to auction. And I think it's just because I want to complete it. I'm also concerned if it's an in-demand card that somebody else might want to come along and grab that card too. But I think and I've talked about this before, it's important to be as patient as you can, especially on certain cards where, hey, if you have to wait 6 months or a year, which is forever in the hobby these days, then maybe it's worth it, right? If it's a card, and I know that Nick and Brett were talking about this last week. I mean, if it's a card that is a 101 or something that you've never seen before in 3 years, then you just have to shoot your shot, right? And you really have to go for it. And I think it's important to do that. But the other thing too is in public sales, right? So we saw the recent sale of the 1984 Star Jordan PSA 9, and that would sell for close to like $1 million, right? And that was a private sale, and it was confirmed, and the buyer didn't disclose his or her name and just said, hey, here's the sale. And you got to wonder, right? Is this person holding a lot of lower grade 84 Star Jordans that they're like, hey, this is gonna rising tide lifts all ships, and then all of a sudden they can start dumping these cards on the market, and then make up whatever additional thing they had to pay. So it's like you don't really know that type of thing. So it's interesting not disclosing private sales, but it's also interesting when it's a private sale that's made public. What's the intent behind that person making that sale, keeping that sale, making that sale public versus keeping it truly private.
Yeah, I feel like with almost pretty much all cards outside of the T206 Honus Wagner 52 Topps Mantle and some of the really, really, really rare vintage, just top of the food chart cards, it's sort of like a crapshoot. What's the valuation? How many are there truly out there? Like, I find myself kind of going, okay, I have this PSA 1087 Fleer. It's really cool, Jordan. It's a really cool card, but I'm like, what if like 25 or 30 more of those things all of a sudden pop up in PSA 10? What's that do to the pot? What's that do to the value of that card? Is that card really that valuable? I don't know. It makes you wonder, and it kind of goes, well, is it really stick with the super obscure cards like those Griffeys I was showing you. No, but then nobody knows who those are. Nobody knows about those cards except for a handful of us. So it's really cool to talk about it, but what's their value really? It's their value is to that particular collecting group, right? That's where the value is going to be, right? Because those are the people who are going to want that card, like myself, or just people who just love shiny cards, I guess, from the '90s. But these like grade-driven values. You talked about this guy could be hanging on to all these like PSA 6s and 7s, and now he's going to slowly trickle them into the market, knowing now that he bought this card. He's going to make up his profit, which is going to pay for the however much more and over he spent on the bigger card. Maybe there's this whole plan, and everybody's sort of, getting excited about it or thinking about it, going, okay, I'm going to go. And you got all these other people that rush in and buy different cards like that star card and going, okay, let's go. And now that market's kind of lifted. But it didn't. I mean, and you're going to have all the cynics in the group in our comment section, I'm sure, going, yes, this has been going on forever, DPZ. Pull your head out of the sand. This has been going on this whole time, and this is what everybody's been manipulating the market. And yeah, I get it. I've taken a lot of L's. Trust me, I'm pretty happy with what I have left. But you also wonder, even with what you have left, what's the true value? I mean, these things weren't worth that much 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they're worth like way more than they were then. Are we gonna go back to that? Like everybody keeps saying we won't, but if a lot of us just don't want to sell some of these cards, how do we really know the true value of them, right? If they haven't sold in 5 years, do we really know how much that card's really worth? Nobody really knows that. Right. It could be worth what it was worth in 2016, but everybody's kind of holding on to it thinking it's worth, again, I'm going down this rabbit hole, but I think it's worth 10, and 3 other guys that have the same card, because there's only 3 or 4 of us that have that card in that grade, they think the same thing, and so none of us are going to sell because we all think it's worth that, when in reality, outside of us 4 or 5 guys that have it, there's like only 3 other people that might want it, and it's definitely not worth what we all think it is. Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do.
House of Cards, man. I feel like everything's kind of built. I don't know. Maybe it's just what I'm thinking today, how I'm feeling today. Ignore me if you want to ignore me in all this, but I'm just throwing some stuff out there. Maybe this whole thing's been built up, and we're like sitting on all these cards that we think, we can't sell them, because they're worth so much, I'll never get it back. But maybe they aren't worth that much.
Yeah. Well, you just have to remember that cards themselves really have no inherent value. So in a private deal, one-on-one, it's worth what the other person thinks it's worth to pay you. Exactly. In a public auction, it's worth essentially what the second or first underbidder is willing to bid to, because then that's what creates the high bid on the card. And so that's essentially what the card's worth at the time of the auction. So that's the only way to truly really know. And I think that's why sometimes people get excited, and it's kind of fun to send a card that hasn't sold in a while to auction, because it's exciting to see. You don't know what it's really going to sell for. You may have an idea, but in some cases you're disappointed. In other cases, right? I recently sold a Peyton Manning 1999 Topps Gold Label 101. And I bought it. It was actually on New Year's Eve that I won it in an auction. And I ended up selling it for nearly 3 times what I paid for it. And I sent it to auction. I had a spreadsheet. I was trying to pay for that Peyton Manning shield. And I said, hey, you know what? If I can get close to what I paid for it, I'll call that a win. And the next thing I know, I get a message from Nick, and he's like, holy cow, that card, set an all-time high. But I didn't know that going into it, right? And if I had tried to sell that privately, then somebody's going to come in and say, hey, I saw where you paid $1,900 for it back in December. I'll give you, $1,750 to avoid the fees, right? And if I needed money right then you might say, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take that, right? But, in my stance, I was like, hey, I want to send all this stuff to auction, and let's see what it does. And, sure enough, then that set a new high watermark for that card. So anyways, it's interesting.
Well, you have to think about the price you paid for a lot of these cards too. You bought them a long time ago. Your point of entry is much lower than a lot of us that have been buying some of these cards in the past 3 or 4 years. We're paying that big premium. We're paying how it's come up, and then we were paying as it was going up somewhere along those lines. And some of us are buying them as they're coming down, and there was still a floor. So if you're buying, some of these cards I have that I've paid a lot of money for were selling for hundreds of dollars 10 years from now, 10 years ago. And when I look at that, that's what frightens me. I look at that and go, what's really keeping us what's really keeping these cards from going back down to that value? What's really doing it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because really, what's really doing? Because if everybody's thinking the same thing I'm thinking, well, then that's frightening to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think we may have talked about it before. One of the features of Card Ladder is you can go back and look at historical data, and you look at it and you're going, man, 10 years ago this card was worth $20, and I just paid $2,000 for it. Let's just say, it's like, did it really go up that much in 10 years? And what's driving that, right? And say it's it sold for $20 and it was a 2006 or something like that. The card's not new. It's been around for 18 years. And so what's driving that demand, which is causing that price to go up? Is it real demand, a demand increase for that card? And is that real? Is it driven by collectors, or is it driven by people that are, starting to flip cards? It's interesting. I feel like there was a big push on the 90s, and there's still a big push on the 90s. But here lately, I'm seeing a lot of the 2000 to 2010 range. You're seeing a lot of people are getting into the, in football, the 2002 finest golds out of 25 and the X Fractors out of 20. And in 2006, people love that design of finest, and there's gold X Fractors and 05 and 06 of finest. And people are really after those. And those are not new cards, right? They've been around for 20 plus years in some cases. And so, why all of a sudden are people gravitating to those when they've been around for such a long time? Is it because, content creators telling them to, or somebody says, hey, this is undervalued? Or is it just people who have made their money in one space and they feel like, ooh, I can get to this spot, and try to pump up the values of these cards, and then maybe try to unload it to somebody else? Because I think you see, 4 years ago, people were, paying $2,000 for a Luka Doncic, population 2,000 base PSA 10. And then I think you're slowly seeing people creeping down into like, oh, well then, $4.99 is rare. No, that's not that rare anymore. Now it's got to be out of 100 or less. And then it's out of 50 or less, and 25, and then out of 10. And I think you're just slowly seeing things kind of creep down as far as what people can do to, try to drive the value out of these cards as much as they can.
Right. And I think a lot of us that are interested in these types of cards are all learning at the same time, or all going, wait a second, this isn't what we thought it was. But I also wonder if that data set from like 2020, late 2020 to till now, or even like back a little ways, those big numbers are just numbers of people getting out of those cards going, holy cow, I spent too much. And even as they're coming down and they had to sell at a loss, those numbers, even at selling at a loss, for some people buying them thinking they're getting them at a discount from the price that people were overpaying for them on, are now way underwater, and they're never going to see that come back up, because there's just so many people that went, I'm done, I got hurt, I'm out. And there weren't true collectors that wanted to keep the card. It just feels like a zero-sum game. There's only a handful of us left, and how valuable are a lot of these cards? It kind of frightens me, because the more people get hurt in the hobby and lose money like that they can't recover from, I mean, that is just going to drive more people away from the hobby, and it's going to make it more difficult to see values and true collectors morph over time, and to want these cards that we're hanging on to. Now, you look at like the Babe Ruths, you look at some of these, these Gaudis and these Gehrigs, all these really, the Wagner, the Mantle. These cards, obviously, they've been valuable forever. They've been valuable within relatively from like an economic standpoint, from an inflationary standpoint. They've always been valuable. So you go, okay, that makes sense, but none of us are buying those cards. See, so the rest of the cards are for us. So I just kind of feel like it's kind of drilling back into, these are great cards to have. Like these cards I'm just picking up those Griffeys. Those are cool, but I spent less than $1,000 on both of those cards, and that's awesome, and even that's like, wow, that's a lot. But still, relative to some of these other cards, I'm like, well, shoot, there's a part of you kind of thinks, should I just sell all these things, get way lesser grade versions that are like, 75% of the cost of getting the high grade version, and just be happy you got one, and just collect it like it's a fun little collectible, and forget about the investment altogether. Like, forget about it. Like, just put the money to work in the stock market and just go. And I mean, not that, I'm being irresponsible in that sense, but it just makes you wonder when you look at the values, like, you should take your money and go, or take it and like maybe get the lower grade versions. The whole thing, the House of Cards conversation, that to me is really, really on my heart. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot. it's just, I don't know, it just has me thinking about a lot of that stuff right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's important for folks, I think, too, to go back and listen to content creators who are making content 10 years ago. Go back and read the old Beckett magazines and things like that, and look at what, the top 10 most popular cards each month were and things like that. I think that's the biggest issue we've seen over the last 4 years is people come in and, they start listening to people who just returned to the hobby 4 years ago, and they see these people as experts and things like that. And these people are saying, hey, you got to buy these cards, and this is the next big thing. And, if this, you need to buy this because it's undervalued and it's going to go up in value. And I think people are just doing that and not really understanding, like, that's a really cool card and it may look nice and all that kind of stuff. But, when you look back on the history of the hobby, there's very few important cards and important sets and important parallels and things like that. And so, if you're spending big money on cards, I think it's truly important to talk to those people who are, experts in that field, or, listen to certain content creators who've been doing it for a long, long time, even longer than just the past 4 years, because, what folks that have done in the past 4 years, and that includes me, includes DPZ, includes lots of others, we're sharing our learnings and experiences.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's in the short term. The rest of it was just, hey, so I got lucky buying Peyton Manning back in the late 90s, and I got lucky because I wanted a LeBron James rookie auto, and I bought a Michael Jordan Fleer. Like, that was just luck. That wasn't me just saying, hey, I really think this card's going to go up in value someday. But there's a lot of people who had a lot of foresight, someone like a Marshall Fogel and, things like that. And he'll admit that there was a lot of luck involved in that.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I think it's just, it's important to listen to folks who have been there and done that, and not just those who have the biggest accounts and the biggest followings and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, I think I feel like we're in the Truman Show. I mean, you and I will both get this reference because we were both the same age and we grew up this stuff. We're like in the Truman Show of the hobby, and our lives are being recorded as we learn and grow in our hobby experiences. I mean, you've been in the hobby way longer than me, but maybe just me, because I've been like coming and I change directions all the time. You kind of see me going and moving, and I'm just being honest. I'm being super transparent. Like, I'm not perfect, and I probably said a lot of things that don't make sense now, and I probably wouldn't agree with I said even a year or two ago. But and I know I think differently, right? And so it's interesting how we kind of we go through this progression and this formation period. And I think maybe we're always going through with your hobby, but I get nervous about the amount of money that's been spent on cards by a lot of people over the past 3 or 4 years, and I don't know if we've seen the effects of that yet. I don't think we've seen the consequences of that yet. I just worry those are coming, and I don't know if it's going to be a good thing for the hobby. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking out loud there on that. Anyway, we've talked about that to death. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything on your heart, your mind, brother, that you want to cover today?
Oh man, I mean, there's always so much. Well, let's finish up with just a quick topic, just something that I was thinking of too. With PSA, they introduced the whole graders notes and that whole sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the thing, which I think is a good thing, right? Because people always wonder, they're like, man, I thought for sure this was a 10, but it got an 8. What did I miss? Right. Well, but what I was wondering about, and I know that, that Beckett is, the scum of the hobby and people don't like it anymore and all that kind of stuff. But Beckett is, in a sense, had graders notes for years, and it's called subgrades, right? They don't really go into why you got a 9 subgrade or a 9.5 or something like that, but at least your overall grade, what went into that overall grade. And so what I'm just wondering is, are the new graders notes, is that just kind of subgrades with a little extra oomph without putting them on the label?
I think so. It's funny because it's not like they need to do anything, because Beckett's not doing anything to help themselves right now. But that is one of the coolest things about Beckett is the subgrades. You know where you stand. You can look at the card and go, oh, that's why it got a 9 or an 8 or whatever it might be. I like that. If the transparency's there, you can learn when you grade. You can go, okay, I missed this. Where was it at? Oh, okay, there it is. So the graders notes would be kind of cool for that reason alone, because you can learn as you sub cards in, find out why, and go, okay, I missed that. Now I have to really look, more carefully when I sub more cards the next time and make sure I don't miss something like that. Or I see a consistency. I keep missing the same thing. I really want to make sure I focus on that before I send in my next submission. But Beckett, that's an opportunity for Beckett to lean into, like, Graders Notes. We've got the subgrades. This is the OG. We're the Grader Notes OGs. Like, let's, if Beckett wants to get back into it, they can push hard on it. Why are they not doing anything? Like, the hobby is better. Even though I love PSA, the hobby is better for having Beckett be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
The hobby is a better place if Beckett's stronger, if Beckett's pushing back
Mm-hmm.
at PSA, because PSA and SGC are the same now. So you just kind of push them out. So it's really just PSA. I mean, I know there's others, but if Beckett just made a run, man, it would be really cool to see them and go, hey, we've got the subgrades. We've got the original Graders Notes. You have them. You can see them right here. So when you're selling it and you're buying and you're negotiating a card and you have like 50 different BGS 9.5s or BGS 9s, you go, well, this BGS 9 is stronger than this BGS. I just did that with the Kobe I sold. My BGS 9 was stronger than the one I just sold. I used it as a negotiating tool, going, this is a stronger card than the last 9 that just sold. And there's this many 9s. Man, that's a really cool feature. Versus with PSA right now, I just have a PSA 9. Trust me, this is a really good PSA 9. What do you mean trust you? Trust you? What are you talking about? It's PSA 9. That's what it says. I'm going to pay what it's worth. The comp was this. This is what I think it's worth. No, but it's better. It's got sharper. You can't say that right now. With BGS, you can actually use it to negotiate. So, man, BGS has an awesome opportunity. If they would just wake up and lean into it, holy cow. That could be pretty cool.
Well, no, exactly. It's kind of like the Probstein listings on eBay, right? It's a PSA 9, but then they say looks gem, right? So, yeah, but it's like, I think it's an important point you hit on, and we had some comments about it in the last episode in our whole PSA, BGS, and all that kind of stuff. Is Beckett is a name brand in the hobby, and even people who are not in the hobby anymore. If I'm talking to somebody and they're like, "Hey, you're into sports cards or something like that," and they're like, "Hey, if I'm looking at values, is it still the Beckett magazine or that sort of thing?" So it has that name value, and I just really hope that, whether it's through a third, an outside company coming in and put new life into it or whatever the case may be, I think it's the hobby's better when Beckett is a strong brand.
Absolutely. Good stuff, brother. Well, hey, man, this is a lot of talking and rant. We went like a little over 7 minutes over our normal time. Hopefully you guys all enjoy that. Drake and I did talk. I did get the last 2 episodes up on Spotify, so I'm sorry all you folks out there are trying to listen to us on Spotify. The last 2 episodes are up, and they're there if you want to listen to them. We talk about PSA 10. We talk about something else. I forget, but it's all there if you want to listen to it. We appreciate you taking your time and commenting. Great comments on the last one. I know I probably did sound like a PSA fanboy. Don't disagree. I love PSA 10s. They're pretty cool. I do believe in those long term. If there's anything I'm kind of feeling good about, I do feel good about the PSA 10. I feel like there's just a lot there that kind of holds it together. But again, who knows, right? Who knows? And Beckett could come out of the woodwork and take over and again, like I said, that would be a really good thing. So we appreciate you taking your time. Anything you want to add, Drake, here?
Yeah, I think just to round out, back to your original question, I'm positive. I'm always a super positive guy. It takes a lot to get me down, and we're less than a month until the national. I'm fired up. I'm starting to get DMs from people wanting to know, like, hey, where you staying? Let's meet up. Are you going to this trade night? I want to see you. I want to visit. Let's make a deal. I've got a buddy of mine that lives down the street. He's coming with me. It's his first national. He's excited. He got his ticket just yesterday. He's pumped. Like, he's really, really excited. And so I think, try to tune out the outside voices that are having this whole, is it the National versus Fanatics Fest? And I'm not going to the National because Fanatics Fest is the latest and greatest stuff. As I've said before, the most exciting part about going to these card shows, and especially the National, is seeing your friends and making those connections. And, you get to see some cool cards and some things you don't see every day. And maybe you pick up something cool for your collection or make a big deal or something like that. But it's more fun, just getting to see your hobby friends, getting to have new experiences. Like, I've never been to Cleveland before. I know Cleveland's not Chicago and it's not New York City or Las Vegas or Dallas or something like that. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see a new city that I've never been to. And, as we mentioned, it's really hot in Arkansas, so maybe it's going to be a little bit cooler in Cleveland. So, so I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it. And, for those of you, if you're going to be at the National, certainly throw a comment in there. I'd love to meet up with as many folks as possible. So,
That's good. That's good stuff, buddy. Hey, I'm feeling a little bit more pessimistic and maybe not pessimistic. I'm just a little, I don't know, a little concerned, but a little more negative, I suppose. And it looks like he's making me feel better. He's positive. He's feeling really good. So we're gonna even each other out a little bit there. I'm sure everything will be fine. I know one thing for sure. I love cards, and even though I go back and forth, I just still love cards. I still want to keep buying them. I just love the shiny cards. I love collecting my players. I love putting some sets together. It's so much fun. So there is a lot of fun in it, and just a lot of things to think about. We're always thinking about stuff. We're always talking about stuff. That's the whole point of this thing. We just talk about things. We're thankful you guys listen to us talk, because I'm sure not a lot of people want to listen to us talk, but we're grateful for it. So, brother, I hope you have a really great 4th of July weekend. That's going to be coming up soon. If we don't talk to you all before then, click, subscribe, comment below. We talked about a lot today. Would love to hear what you guys all think, and have a safe weekend. Take care.